As the federal government, under its National Housing Act of 1934, followed by its National Housing Act of 1937, and then followed by the GI Bill of 1944 for returning vets, as they're funding home ownership for working class white people with low interest rate and low down payments, with the caveat that these white people move away from black people. Well, at some point, moving away from black people means moving out of the city. At some point, in an early point, it means moving away from Black Bottom, or moving away from the old West Side, or moving away from 12 Dexter Linwood. You can't just move to one side of the city, you gotta move out of the city. So as they begin moving to the suburbs, these whites who are benefiting from federal government home loans, FHA-backed home loans, as they're moving out, an infrastructure has to be created for them in these villages and townships that now little by little becoming cities as more and more white people are moving to them. So they need infrastructure. And once the infrastructure is put in, because the state will fund it, and in many cases the federal government will fund this infrastructure for these outlying communities that we call suburbs today, and this infrastructure is created, well, now businesses see this as a benefit. They can move into a place that has a water system, its own fire department, its own police department, and move out of the city and escape city taxes. They can escape because these are new towns. They haven't even established a city tax yet. They don't even have that. So if you move into those places, there's no city tax, at least for the first few years while you're there, because they don't even have that established yet. Detroit has that established. So Henry Ford opened the door when he built his Model T plant in Highland Park. And then Dodge builds their Dodge Main plant in Hamtramck to escape Detroit taxes. Well, now these new suburbs are coming online. Now you got businesses saying we're gonna flee there because now we don't have to pay city taxes. And so they go out, there's an infrastructure already built for them. They don't have to fund it like Henry Ford did a lot of that in Highland Park. He built a lot of stuff himself. He laid streets, he put up, funded schools, he did all of that. But now, the federal government is doing that. So now it's even easier for businesses to move out to Royal Oak, or to Birmingham, or to Grosse Pointe, or to East Detroit, which becomes East Point, or Sterling Heights. It's easier for them to do this because the government is paying for all of this. And so they're moving. And so Detroit is losing its businesses. And businesses who are starting aren't starting in Detroit. They're starting where the white workers already live, in the suburbs. And so this is deindustrialization. It is a response to housing policy largely by the federal government. Detroit is losing population, number one. But number two, they're not getting the tax revenue from property taxes because there's less people who own homes in the city of Detroit. So what do they got to do? They got to do everything they can to woo industries to stay, come, no matter what they are. What does the city council zoning rules reflect? If you look at the zoning laws after World War II and the zoning ordinances in the city of Detroit after World War II, you see they reflect what's happening by the federal government. So places that used to be residential end up being a place where you can build a factory, a very polluting factory, or you can have a liquor store in that area. And so the fact that we have a concentration of liquor stores, strip clubs, and polluting types of factories in the city of Detroit are a direct correlation to white flight, federal government funded home loans. All of that is a part of that mix. And Detroit is suffering from federal policy, but the African Americans who are stuck in the city of Detroit, because all of these suburbs have racial restrictive covenants to keep black people out. So they're all basically sundown towns for African Americans. You can work there, but you can't live out here. You can't live in Royal Oak, couldn't live in Ferndale back then, couldn't live in Warren, Livonia, definitely not Dearborn, Westland, you couldn't live in those places, Melvindale, Allen Park, you couldn't live in those places. Grosse Pointe, African Americans are being blocked from taking advantage of housing in Detroit, blocked from taking advantage and moving to the suburbs, and the city is losing their industries because of what the federal government and state policies are doing, and you're losing your property tax revenue, and you're not getting industry or business tax revenue, you're becoming little by little a city in poverty. And I don't mean just the residents. I mean the government, the revenue of the city itself is becoming impoverished, which of course will culminate with a bankruptcy, a municipal bankruptcy in the city of Detroit, the largest municipal bankruptcy in America's history. It's not even. So it would be great to say we're rising and we're going in the right direction. Some people want to say that we're falling and we're going in the wrong direction. Both are happening at the same time because we really got two Detroits. So both things are happening. In some places in the city of Detroit, you see businesses flourishing, growing, more businesses, more stores, shops, restaurants, places for people to be. Downtown, of course, is bustling at a level that it didn't when I was growing up in the 70s and 80s, because I was living with the post-1967 and post-white flight, and I was living with that Detroit. Now in downtown and midtown, there's many businesses that have relocated to the city of Detroit, which help create a foundation for new businesses to sprout right here in the city of Detroit. So you got that. But then you got other parts of the city of Detroit where it's one house left on the block. Their water has been shut off. People have water foreclosures, tax foreclosures. All of these things are happening at the same time. On one end, you got one thing happening, on the other end, you got the other. That is an uneven development that Detroit is experiencing right now. It is both happening at the same time. Now, when it comes to gentrification, because of the rise in opportunities and businesses in certain sections of the city of Detroit, those areas are attracting young, professional workers and entrepreneurs. So some people are starting their own businesses and attracting that group of people as their customers. So that means the property taxes in that area, if you've been living there since the 60s and 70s, your property taxes have gone up. You can't afford to stay there. And so now you are priced out of the neighborhood you were part of saving. You were one of the people who stayed there so they didn't go to the total dumps, but now you can't even afford to stay there anymore. Your property taxes have gone up. If you are living in that area, you can't afford, in many cases, the property taxes, but you're a renter, the owner of the place that you're renting from is trying to attract not the legacy, not the long-term residents who've been paying really the rent of a low-income person. They want to attract this new group of people who have higher income and can pay more. And so they're raising their rents, pricing out their long-term residents. So they have to find somewhere else to live, and are trying to attract the new young professionals who can afford to stay, particularly in or near downtown, in or near midtown, in and near Corktown. And now we're beginning to see it in other areas. We're beginning to see it in the University District. We're starting to see it in Sherwood Forest. We're beginning to see it in Bagley. So we're seeing it in other areas too. But for a long time, it was Midtown, downtown, Corktown, that area. But it's starting to spread. New Center, Boston Edison. We're beginning to see as property taxes go up, the value of the property goes up, they are being priced out of their communities. And so we see a different kind of urban renewal that's happening. It's not the federal government passing a National Housing Act. It's not the city building a freeway or the state building a freeway through the neighborhood, but it is the rise of businesses, industries in particular areas, which is causing that area to heighten its property value and pricing the people, the long-term residents, out of being able to be in those areas.
What's the hope? What's the hope?
The hope is that Detroit is 139 square miles, and there are whole areas of the city of Detroit where none of that stuff is happening. And that would be the time, that would be the place. Like Malcolm X said in the city of Detroit on November 10th, 1963, land is the basis of independence. There is land that exists, there's places that can be built from scratch that are, at this point, no one sees the value in that area. It's not next to downtown, not next to midtown, it ain't next to Corktown, so no one sees the value. But it's up to us to see the value and what could be created in those places and what could come out of those places. And if that happens, in these areas that nobody's touching in the city of Detroit, we could see a major change, particularly for the long-term residents, most of whom are African American.